Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. I'm James, and you're watching Blue Dog Aquatics. Now, I got to make sure the sound is on first. So, yeah, there we go. If you hear Bubba in the background, he's just pacing. He's doing his thing. Bubba is my German Shepherd. Sorry about the mess over here. We are actually tearing down a 220 gallon over here, and it's crazy to find out like how much stuff is actually underneath an aquarium that you forget about. You're like, oh my God, look at all that stuff. But anyway, this is our first ever live stream. Now, I've never done a live stream before. I'm so used to the nuts and bolts of it and doing all the editing with imaging and, going through and going, okay, well, adding this picture. And that was actually kind of what I was looking at before I even uh, clicked on live because I was like, well, I just I don't know if I can add pictures or if I can add this. And so I was like, you know what? We're just going to go for it. We'll do it once. We'll see how it goes. And who knows, we may make it a regular thing. Now, today, what we're going to talk about is the DIY uh, projects, and that breaks down to aquatics, and that also breaks down to um, reptiles, because you can do DIY projects for both. Um, Whether it's, and when I say DIY, I'm talking about background imaging. Now, you can do it for aquariums to do a custom scape for your fish to swim through and for it to look more like a natural environment with maybe some driftwood or some spiderwood, or even some Malaysian wood coming down and doing that vine effect throughout bigger enclosures. But lately, we've been doing a lot of custom builds on reptile enclosures, and that's because some of our animals are getting bigger and we want to give them places to hide, and we also want to have that natural environment for them. We want them to feel as safe and as comfortable as possible. And yeah, it's definitely an undertaking, but guess what? I'm going to walk you through each and every piece of it. I wish I could. And if you know how to upload pictures while you're doing live streams, please let me know. Like I said, I'm still learning on live stream, so I want to bring the best video possible for you guys. But without further ado, here we go. So currently, we transformed a 40. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of the TikTok videos that we've done at the shop. And if you haven't, make sure to follow us on TikTok. We do lots of videos of our DIY projects, making them as natural as possible. But the one we've been working on here at the house right now is a 40 breeder custom tank. And with that, we are doing it's for, we call her Callie. She's a king snake. And right now she was in a 20 gallon, and we're like, okay, she's getting really big really fast. And so we're like, well, screw it. We'll just do a big custom scape for her. Now, the first thing when you are doing a background on an enclosure is to make sure that it's clean. What we do in preparation for doing backgrounds is we actually use rubbing alcohol, and that way we get any debris or foreign contaminants or anything like that off of the glass that we're going to be working. Now, if you have bigger enclosures, it gets tricky because the easiest way to do it is to lay it on the side that you're working. Um, if you have an enclosure that's like multiple stacks, then it gets kind of tricky because you can't take them apart to lay them on particular sides. So, and we can walk you through that too. Um, so the one we are working on right now, like I said, it's a 40, and so we were able to lay it on its back, lay it on its side, lay it on its other side, lay it on its front. And we start by doing the rubbing alcohol. Then we did a foam is your best friend in this. And now, depending on what type of environment you're going to. So if you're using fish, you have to, or using it for a fish background, you have to be very specific on the type of foam that you're using. Yeah, Bubba's over here talking. Now, the best one that I found so far is pond and stone foam. And you can find that at your local chain stores. It runs about $9.50 a can, and you're like, oh, you know, one or two cans. No, it adds up. The build we did downstairs, I think we used 5 or 6 cans. And with doing that, I like to get the ones that they don't plug up right away, you know, when you're using the nozzle. And Pond and Stone is really good with that. It's also like a grayish black uh, foam, and so that it hides stuff really well. Now, so what you'll do is, let's say you're working on the back, you will spray all the foam across the back, and then you will uh, go through. Now, there's a couple of ways to do it. I actually let it set for a day. What, Baba? I actually let it set for a day. That way it cures, and then I flip it onto the other side so that I can do that side and let it set, and then you flip it on its other end to let that set. Now, moving forward with that, once it's all set, you know, as we've all seen with foam, it will come out and it will, you know, it comes out all different ways, and then you have waves going down. And next, what you want to do is you want to use a carving knife and carve it into different ways to get that ledge effect. You can take a razor blade and carve that down so that it looks more natural and not just a bunch of little bumps from the foam gun. Um, Once you have that carved down, then you can go through and make sure to clean it out really well. So after you've carved everything, I also put flower pots in there. So that way, if you're doing a bioactive enclosure, you can have a spot for your plants to sit, maybe up on the wall or down on the ground. And that way, you know, whatever animal's in there is going to be less likely to uproot them. Now, with the um, after you get done with carving, you can do the uh, some people use silicone. I actually found a new method because, man, silicone, aquarium silicone is so potent. And when you put that in such a small area, it's kind of hard to breathe. Anytime you're doing DIY projects, I recommend wearing masks. Make sure you're wearing protective gloves. That way you're protecting yourself because you are in such a confined space that you don't need to be inhaling all that. We actually switched over. We did a couple with aquarium silicone, and it's about $10 a tube, and it really doesn't go far. We also found it's called a Gorilla Glue adhesive, and it actually works really well. I found out that one tall can actually last about 3 enclosures, depending on how heavily you were doing the background. Now, the difference between aquarium silicone and an adhesive is the aquarium silicone is going to allow you more time to play with it. So it's not going to dry right away. It takes 24 to 48 hours for it to dry. Whereas an adhesive, you have literally a couple of minutes. Now, with the adhesive, it's nice because you don't have to wait several days for the background to dry. It literally takes about 10 minutes for it to dry, and then you're like, okay, we're good to go. Dan Can Aquatics, what's up, guys? What's going on? Thanks for tuning in to our first live stream. But yeah, like I said, with the backgrounds, adhesives are definitely the way to go. I just find that they're a lot easier to work with and a lot easier to manage. Now, once you figured out whether you're going to use an adhesive or a silicone for your background, you need to figure out what type of background you want to do. Do you want to use cocoa fiber? Do you want to use moss? Do you want to incorporate cork bark or driftwood? Also, before you foam in any of the background, make sure to lay out, if you're incorporating cork wood or driftwood, lay it out how you want it. Oh, look, Bubba's saying hi. Bubba. Hey, Bubba. He's coming up to say hi. Make sure to lay it out how you want it, because if you don't, then you're going to be carving a hole for a piece of driftwood, and then you're going to be refoaming it, and then you have to wait for it to set. I typically, when I lay out an enclosure or a fish tank, I always set the driftwood in there beforehand, and then I step back and take a look at it, and I'm like, okay, what type of fish or what type of reptile is going to go in this enclosure? Because that is greatly going to determine how you have to lay out an enclosure or a fish tank, because you want to make sure that they have plenty of room to move around. It doesn't inhibit the flow of, let's say, if it's an aquarium, if it's a filter, you don't want filter blowing on the side of that piece of driftwood and then it blowing back and putting all the pressure on the sides of your tanks. So, excuse me. Now, with enclosures, what we do is we'll actually set the driftwood in there, and the driftwood typically. So, like I said, this one that we're working on right now, the 40, we have a couple of pieces of driftwood in there, but they're angled up. None of them touch the ground, and that is so we can, or the snake, the king snake, has plenty of room to move around as she gets bigger, and she has places where she can go up and hang out, and it's actually a really cool. It turned out really well, and I'll tell you what we used for driftwood. We actually went with a Malaysian wood. I like the twistiness of it. It looks more natural. Now, when you do put in driftwood, there's two things that you can also do if you're doing it for reptiles. You can actually adhere moss and cocoa fiber or bedding or anything like that that you want to the actual wood. Say you put in a piece and you're like, nope, I just don't like how that looks. Well, guess what? You can change it. It's not permanent. Trust me. We've done countless amounts of enclosures. Sorry. But when it comes to doing the finished product, you want to make sure that it's all set up and all squared away and all good to go. Anytime we do enclosures, whether it's a fish tank or a reptile enclosure, there's lots and lots of different steps in doing that. And so typically we have a checklist of how we do it. We start with, okay, we clean the tank, because you can't really work, or if you're using adhesives or silicones, if you have a dirty tank. We vacuum it out. We use rubbing alcohol. And depending on if it's we actually use an ivermectin treatment, and that's for our snake enclosures. See you in Dallas. Sell it. Hey guys, how's it going? But so once you got the aquarium or enclosure clean, then you move on to layout. Step 2 is layout, and that's so you can lay out all your driftwood. You can lay out your design of what you have in your head, what's going to be perfect for that animal or perfect for that fish. You want to make sure that it's the right way. And trust me, change it up, look at it, move it around, because sometimes the first layout you put in there is not going to be what you want. When I do custom enclosures, trust me, if I have driftwood in there, I changed around like 3 or 4 times going, well, what if we did it this way and put maybe cork on the wall here so that it looked more natural? And if we had a piece of spider wood that came down from the corner, and kind of hovered over the top of a plant, and the plant could grow up through the spiderwood. There's a lot that goes into, you know, these projects, and you just want to make sure that you do it the right way. Now, the next step, once you get your layout, is foaming. And we talked about this. It's best if you can actually flip the enclosure on the side that you're working with. That way, because foam has a tendency, especially if it's a slick surface, of sagging. And so you'll end up with like a very thin layer up here and then a really fat layer down here, which, I mean, you know, you could build some tunnels or some hides. I mean, it could work, but it's just overall better if you can actually flip the enclosure on the side that you're working with. That way it stays even across the entire setup. Now, once you get all your foam set up, we already talked about this, but we'll cover it again. The next step is to carve it. Now, do you want your enclosure to have a rock look, or have a uh, underwater kind of trashy look where it looks more natural and it's like maybe eaten away? Or I've seen people use blow torches on enclosures because then they're like, oh, maybe it got hot and it sank in right here. And so there's lots of different options when you're carving up the foam. Like I said, when you do foam, I do recommend the Pond and Stone that you can pick up at Menards or any hardware store. It runs about $9.50, $9.70 a can. So it can be expensive because it takes quite a bit, and it really depends on what type of setup you're doing. Like I said, the one that we're working on right now downstairs took about 5 cans. So now, next step, after you get your carving done, make sure to vacuum it out. Get all that loose foreign contaminants of the foam. That way you're not like trying to glue foam to the side of the foam. I mean, I guess it could work, but hey, what's up? Welcome, guys. Mystery Snail Guardians. Welcome. Now, after you vacuum out all your shavings, and trust me, it adds up. You're like, oh, a little piece here, a little piece there. Oh, this. My girlfriend actually helps me really, really well. She helps me a lot with these builds because sometimes I get so tunnel visioned on how I'm doing this and the way I'm doing it that I'm like, well, I lose sight of the overall picture. And she's like, well, let's step back and take a look at it. And it really helps. It really does help to have a second set of eyes, because someone could be like, well, if you carve this down, then you could have like a little hide up here or a cave. And especially when you're doing enclosures for like geckos, geckos love lots of places to hide. We just did one at the store, which if you haven't come to see us at our store, we are at 7322 Harrison Street, and that's La Vista, Nebraska, 68128. So make sure to come and see us. We have lots of reptiles, lots of fish. Our inventory is growing more and more each and every day. But anyway, back to geckos. Geckos love to hide. We have a day gecko that his favorite spot is up in one of the up in one of the corners in this little cave that we dug out for him. It's his favorite spot. And then he like dive bombs. Anytime we put food in there, he's like, ninja, I'm going to come in and get it. But after you think about it, and after you get it carved out the way you want it, next comes the silicone and adhesive. Now, we did talk about this. Silicone, you need to be very, very careful, because the animals are going to be incorporating and touching these pieces of silicone. So if you don't use something that's either like a G1 or an aquarium silicone, don't do it, because it can be harmful to whatever animal, especially if you are doing a fish background in an aquarium. Use only aquarium silicone. That way, and I know there's a couple of other ones. I can't think of them off the top of my head. If you can, make sure to message us so that we can make sure to tell everybody what you've successfully used. But so once you've checked off. Okay, yes, I'm using this adhesive or this silicone. Next comes to the background, the actual coating. Now you can use cocoa fiber, or you can use moss or sand. And again, this comes down to what type of animal is going in this enclosure. Obviously, with fish, you're not going to have, I mean, I guess you could put like a bunch of little pebbles or like pieces of slate from the foam that you're carving. I mean, it'd be really cool. I've seen some amazing backgrounds to fish tanks. They're incredible. You can see the little fish tank we have back here that actually has fire belly newts in it. Yeah, they love it. They're little fatties. We haven't done a video on them yet, which I think sometime soon we will. But yeah, can everybody hear me all right? I want to make sure that this audio is actually coming through really well. But so, like I said, background next, and very close to the next setting is what you're going to put on that background. Now, we like to use cocoa fiber a lot, and that's because it fills in really nicely, and it does a really nice dirt look. So if you have animals that spend a lot of time like underground or up in like the caves of like a tree or the nooks and crannies. Awesome. Thank you, local Austin. All right, good. I wasn't sure. You know, I've never done a live stream, so I was like, I don't know if the the audio is coming through good or not. But like I said, we use cocoa fiber, and it really depends on what animal we're doing. But we also like to incorporate moss in it too, to make the environment as natural as possible. We actually use the Gorilla adhesive versus Aquarium silicone, and I kind of touched base on this a little bit in the beginning, and that's because Aquarium silicone, very, very potent. Make sure to wear your PPE, or so like your glasses, mask, gloves. Very important because that stuff's very, very potent, especially in very confined areas. With reptile enclosures, you could do I can see your fish, Iman. You can do a, like I said, I use adhesive, and that's because it dries very quickly. Typically, when I use the Gorilla adhesive on an enclosure, I can spray down, and normally I do it in about sections of probably about 4x4. You know, you spray it down really well. You pat it with whatever you're doing, whether it's moss, sand, cocoa fiber, pieces of rock, pieces of cork bark, what have you. And that's because this stuff dries so quickly that if you did a large section, sometimes you're going to miss a section, and then guess what? Then you're spraying again, and it's just a lot more extra work. Now, my girlfriend and I have two different ways of actually applying the, let's say, cocoa fiber, and that's what we just used on the 40 breeder downstairs. Now, what she'll do is she will actually take the cocoa, she'll spray the wall in a section, and she will take the cocoa fiber in her hand, and she will actually pat it up against the foam. That way she gets a nice even layer. But for me, that looks too, I mean, don't get me wrong, it looks nice. But for me, I want that rustic look where it's watching down. Like if you were to go outside and you look at the side of a hill, it's not perfect and laid out. You know, it's washed out, and you know there's nooks and crannies. So the way I do it is I spray, and then I take a handful of it and I chuck it at the wall, and it gives it that very uneven, more natural look. Now, do you make a mess doing that? Absolutely. Trust me, I had one heck of a mess to clean up afterwards, but you know, it is what it is. Fishimon, thank you very much for coming and seeing us here. Now, once you get your base coat of cocoa fiber or moss. Now comes the point of, okay, I typically let that dry, whether I'm using silicone, adhesive, whatever, for 24 hours. Then what I will do is I will take the shop vac and I will go in there and I will remove any excess moss or cocoa fiber or whatever. That way I can see the finished, cleaned up product. Um, Lets me know if I need to add in more cocoa fiber or maybe add a dab of moss up here or add, okay, maybe I want to put like a little rock up here. And so it's kind of the review stage of finishing up a custom build. Now, once you do that and you're very content, well, guess what? Now it's just incorporating the bottom. And because the bottom is open, we have been switching all of our enclosures over to bioactive. The way you can accomplish this very simply is you can get clay balls. Typically, I go with the smaller ones. Do a nice thin layer over the bottom, and then you need your drainage layer, so you can use mesh or honestly the screen that you use for screen doors works perfectly. It's already in a roll, and you can roll it out exactly to the parameters or the not the parameters. Wow, to the measurements that you need, and then you need the layer on top of that. So we actually use a topsoil organic soil, and we'll do another thin layer on the top of that, and then we incorporate blanket moss or shredded moss on top of that to help with humidity. Obviously, we also incorporate hides and everything. And then last but not least is incorporating and putting in the animal. Obviously, a lot of this leaned more toward reptiles because, I mean, I wonder if you could do a bioactive on a fish tank. I mean, it's its own ecosystem, but you wouldn't be able to set it up the way you would an aquarium. No, probably not. Anyway, yeah, this is what my mind does all the time because I'm thinking of new ways to incorporate and to make these habitats more natural and make these enclosures the best possible way. That way, these animals, for how short of a time they're with me at my shop, can live the fullest and happiest lives. Now, at your house, obviously, you're going to do something that is custom for that animal because odds are you're going to have that animal for a lot of years. And that's fine. You know, that is the way it should be. Animals, you know, they're not presents. They're not, oh, exciting for 2 seconds and then I'm bored. No, these are lifetime commitments. You know, your average animal lives in 7 to 10 years. And so that's 7 to 10 years that you need to put into the care and lifestyle of that animal. And I would honestly, with any reptile that you have going out looking like that, I would recommend doing a custom background, a bioactive enclosure. Oh, also with bioactive, make sure to incorporate your isopods, springtails, your cleanup crews. That way it actually is bioactive. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. We actually just got a ton of new isopods in, and we had a customer in yesterday that we had one last thing of Dalmatian isopods. He's like, oh my God. He's like, I have a Dalmatian at home. I'm like, okay. He's like, so I need them to match. I'm like, you're never going to see them, but all right. I want to move some ferns and mosses from a local lake and make some small terrarium jar enclosures. Any advice to help with success? So, thank you, Austin. The question was, if you move some ferns and mosses from a local lake into like a smaller terrarium jar enclosures, any advice to help with success? Now, the biggest thing with that is obviously foreign contaminants because you know you have treatments, chemical treatments that are sprayed around the lakes, and you know to prevent weeds or And some of that leaches into the water. So, and obviously, you know, if it's growing underwater, it's doing its thing. But with any plant or moss that you incorporate, and it depends on if you're going to incorporate an animal with these or not. Let's start with or not. If you're not going to incorporate an animal with these that you pull, I still recommend going through soaking them in RO water or purified water or distilled water, um, and do a dab of Prime or Excel in there. That way, if there are any foreign critters hanging on or doing their thing, that removes all those insects or bugs or snails or what have you. And you could incorporate it into a little jar enclosure. Sorry, my dog loves he has a little pug, and it's a toy inside of a toy. And he's so pissed that he can't, yep, you can see him. He's so pissed that he can't get to the toy inside the toy. But, okay, so back to this. Now, if you are incorporating animals with the ferns or the moss that you're taking from a lake or natural lake, you still want to go through the processes of doing it where you bring it home. I actually will put it in a warmer water, and slowly raise the temperature of that water. And I'm not talking about boiling the water because you will murder that plant. But you were not going to put an animal. Okay. Well, yeah. Then if you're not going to put an animal, then just make sure to bring it home, put it in a 5-gallon bucket, because we all know we have a million different 5-gallon buckets. Fill it up, put some Excel in there, which for those of you that don't know what Excel is for aquatic plants. And what it does is it helps remove like funguses and bacteria loads and all that. Now, you also want to do it in a purified, so either distilled or RO water. And I would let that sit for 24 hours in a bucket. You could put like a little fan in there. That way it circulates the water and gets the plants moving. Or you can literally stick your hand in there and spin it around a couple of times. But then once that's done, take the plants out, let them actually dry. Now with mosses and everything, you don't want them to dry out completely, but let them dry out most of the way. That way, if you do have some hitchhikers that made it through the first process, they'll either come off or they'll die at the second process. Then you just do a quick dip in the water again, just to shake off any loose guys, and then you're ready to incorporate it into your small little jars, which make sure to send us pictures. That'd be really awesome to see. I've actually I moved some enclosures to the shop, and the thumbnail that is on this video is actually a bioactive that I just did. And and for me, I didn't want people to associate, because when you think about cleanup crews, your millipedes, your isopods, your springtails, centipedes, all that, nobody ever sees them. And typically they're in a jar or they're in uh, a bin where you're not going to ever see them. And I wanted people to truly see how beautiful and amazing these animals really are. And so I had a 60-gallon tall aquarium that I had down in my basement, and it's been down there for a better part of a decade, mostly because I forgot it was even there. But I was like, you know what? We're going to take this to the store and we're going to do something with it. And that's exactly what we did. We did the bioball layers, then we did the mesh layer on top of that. And we actually incorporated some coral rock as a void spot. So if you look at the picture, 60 talls are very skinny. And so we wanted the valley down in the middle, and we wanted it to build all the way up on the sides. Well, building up, that's a whole lot of soil. And, you know, if you get a heavy mister in there, it'll wash out. And so what we did is actually we positioned dried out coral rock in the middle of each hill. That way you can't see it all the way around. And all it's there to do is to actually structurally support the soil. And yeah, it turned out really amazing. We did some sheet moss. We put some leaf litter in there. We also did a what you call it? We have a couple of different millipedes, which I love watching them. They just do their own thing, going all the way around. We put powder blue isopods in, which, I mean, blue is my favorite color, so why not? And then we also threw in some white springtails. And as long as you keep the humidity in there and keep everything watered. Now, I will say something with moss. If you're using the sheep moss, definitely the first week that it's in a new enclosure or a new bioactive, make sure to heavily saturate it. That way you can get that bond from the moss to the soil. If you don't, then you'll actually notice that your moss will start browning out. Now, if you're noticing that the moss is starting to brown out, it means that it doesn't have enough moisture, and you need to add more moisture to it. Austin, I hope that answered that question for you. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to ask. We're on the topic of DIY projects and custom builds and for aquariums and for reptiles. It's truly insane on what you can accomplish with a simple DIY project when it comes to backgrounds. And I will touch base on something. So if you were going to use a something from outside, let's say it's a piece of driftwood that you found, or actually, you know what, driftwood we'll touch on here in a minute. Let's talk about cork bark or branches. Now, obviously, first thing you want to do with something that you find outside is treat it. What I do is I will actually hose it off, and then I will submerge it. We have a pond outside that we submerge them in. We leave them out there for a couple of days, and then we're doing something the first time, it increases luck. Absolutely, buddy. Appreciate it. I'm glad we could help. And so driftwood or branches. And then what you want to do is I actually have a spot on my porch where I will lay out cork or driftwood. That way it can dry out naturally, unless, of course, your city likes to rain, and then it really sucks. Then you need a tarp. But once it's somewhat dry, turn on your oven to 250 degrees and stick them in for 10 minutes at a time. You should be able to pull it out after that 10 minutes, and it should be dry. Then take it outside and wipe off, because as it dries, it's actually going to break off some of the loose contaminants, and that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to kill the bad bacteria that's on those and any bugs that are trying to hitch rides. So, and then what I do is I'll hose it down again, and then I'll throw it back in the oven for another round, just to make sure everything's dead. I know people say, well, if you put it in a bioactive enclosure, well, then bugs are just going to go right back into it. Bubba sees somebody through the window. But yes, that's true. If you do put a piece of cork into a bioactive enclosure, yes, bugs are going to be driven to it. However, they're going to be bugs that I put in the enclosure, not who knows what bugs from outside. Now, driftwood, especially when you get into like the bigger pieces, they get a little bit tricky on how to treat, because obviously you can't shove them in the oven, because, well, when you get a 4 or 5 foot piece, I mean, I don't personally have an oven that big. Mine's like an old run-of-the-mill. If it's 2 foot, maybe I could twerk it in there to get it to fit. But typically, when you have larger pieces of driftwood, you have to treat them a different way. And the way to do that is, and this is a good way to get your bathtub clean. So we will actually, and it's nice to have 2 bathrooms to be able to do this, because obviously you still got to take a shower, or if you're that person that just doesn't shower, well, go shower. But so what we do is I fill up the tub. I typically load it down with driftwood. That way, because I mean, it takes a while to do this. We'll load it down with a bunch of pieces, and we let them soak for 24 hours just with regular bath water. That's to get all the gunk and grime and all that loose crap off. Then we'll scrub them down with a brush to get any loose stuff off. And so we'll clean out the tub after that. And then we put them back in the tub. And this round, we're actually doing the bleaching. So this is why a lot of driftwood that you see is actually white, or it has hints of white and pink. And that's because it's been treated with bleach. Now, different people have different methods on the level of bleach that they put in a treatment. What I typically do is I do an 80-20. So I do 80% bleach and I do 20% on the water. Now, do I mean fill my bathtub with 80% of straight bleach? No, I do not, because that would be a ton of that'd be a ton of bleach. The store would be like, what are you doing with all this bleach? No. So you can, what I do is I have a gallon jug that I do 80% bleach and 20. And then what we do is we actually hose down all the driftwood with that chemical treatment. Now, you can do it the other way and do 20% bleach and 80% water if you're just going to fill your bathtub and do it that way. I mean, to each their own. It's up to you. Typically, I mean, you're going to have the same effect if you do it from a bottle and just saturate the wood, or if you soak it. Because I'll tell you what, if the way I do it, like I said, in a gallon bottle, and then I do the 80% bleach, 20%, then I soak down the wood. Then I let that sit for 48 hours. Then what I do from there is I actually put it back in the bathtub and I fill it up with just regular water again, and I let that sit for 24 hours. And what we're doing there is we're actually removing anything that the bleach killed. And so typically when you're treating driftwood in a bathtub, it'll take on average about 4 to 5 days. Typically when we do it, it's about 4 days. So yeah, there's that for you. It's crazy, all this crazy stuff that you pick up over the years, and the amazing people that you talk to around the world, or even on here on YouTube. Everybody's like, well, how do you know everything? Guess what? I don't. I am always learning new stuff, and I'm happy to learn new stuff, because it means that I'm still growing in my knowledge. And, guess what? If there's a better way to do it, I am all ears, because doing that saves me time, saves me money, and helps me pass on that knowledge to customers that come into my store. So, yeah, that being said. But yeah, with the enclosure that we have downstairs, the DIY, it's at we put cocoa fiber or cocoa husk on the sides. And so right now it's drying. I think we might incorporate some pieces of moss along the edges or around the plants that we put, or the plant, what do you call them? They're the little plastic things that have drainage. a little pot holder. We have a couple of those in there, and so hey, thanks for joining us, Nature Aquarium. So what we're going to do with that is we're actually going to, I think around the potted plants, we do have foam built up there, and we were able to carve it away. We did do cocoa husk around it to make it match the rest of the environment, but it's very, very brown for me. It kind of looks like my walls where they're all natural. But I definitely think that we're going to incorporate some blanket moss or some rope vines. Being as it's going to be for the California king snake, I think, or not California, she's not a Cali, but she is a king snake. See, it always confuses me because her name is Callie. My daughter named her. But anyway, it's too brown for me, and you'll definitely see that when you do custom builds. When you do a solid background, it'll seem like too much. It'll seem very bland or overextended because you're like, well, there's just like no depth. There's no, it all looks the same. And that's why we do live plants. That's why, and on that note, when you do live plants, do your research because not all plants are safe for animals. Um, there is, uh, there is lots and lots of plants that are very, very deadly for animals. So make sure to do your research on that, especially when it comes to like chameleons and geckos. Um, Ferns typically are all right, and one of my favorites is a lady bamboo. It's really well and it holds humidity very, very well. I have yet to find one that comes very small. Typically, the ones that I find are very, very large, which I mean works out for my chameleons because they have a custom built enclosure, and so I just shove that in there and they're good to go. Um, but back to the backgrounds, if you do, oh, you love the tree. So that tree behind me, yeah, it's actually one of my favorites. It is actually one of the oldest trees in the world. And it's crazy. You can't see it, but there's actually cables that go across to actually support the branches because the branches weigh so much. It is absolutely my favorite tree. I wanted it front and center of my house. And it might eventually move to the shop, but we'll see. I don't have a whole lot of wall space at the shop. But like I was saying with the enclosures, when you do that first layer of cocoa husk or moss, you do want to incorporate some other type of background, whether like it's a really shiny rock or I know a lot of people that have been coming into my store use Hawaiian Sunset rock because it's a very nice slate looking rock. It's kind of got that like chalky look to it. A lot of people have been enjoying using that for custom builds. And then, like I said, I think we're going to use some sheet moss. And all that is sheet moss comes in a big bag. And what it is it's just folded in half. And somebody literally went out and cut it very finely right up next to the roots. And so it's a big piece. And what you can do with that is you can actually cut it up into strips or cut it up into sections or cut it up however you like and put it however you want. Now, like I did say, make sure to saturate sheet moss very, very well. That way you keep up with your humidity and also that it doesn't die off and go brown on you. So, but yeah, that's my notes on that. We've had some amazing builds lately, and I really enjoy doing custom scapes and custom builds because it pushes your brain to think of new ways or new creations. I mean, very much like, oh my God, could you imagine doing a background like that tree? I mean, it'd have to be an enormous enclosure, But how cool would that be? That would be so awesome. I would have to do what happens when you overwater moss. So when you overwater moss, it can actually become soggy, and will. It depends on what's underneath the moss. If you have soil underneath, typically it's really hard to overwater moss, because the soil will absorb any excess water. If you have moss on something that doesn't have a lot of background behind it, so like, um, let's say putting moss on the side of an enclosure, well, same thing's going to happen. You're actually going to have to. My dog's being mouthy. Um, it's actually, that's a good question, because I don't have really any issues with overwatering moss, because typically either A, the environment is going to push that humidity from the moss into the rest of the tank and help other plant growth with that humidity, or that water from that moss is either, if it's on the side of an enclosure, it's going to drain down into your bioactive clay, um, or you're going to, on lava rock. Okay. Lava rock is actually really good for, it's actually really good for a base. I've heard of a lot of people using it, and that's because the water. And if you want really good filtration, like water filtration, lava rock is actually the way to go, because the minerals that are in lava rock help purify water. That's why like on the sides of volcanoes and stuff like that, when the water goes through the different layers of the rock that has come from the volcano, it actually is purified going through the lava rock. I actually learned that when I was in college. It's crazy. But so if you put moss on top of lava rock, I would have something else. It depends on really how big of an area you have. If you're just doing, like, let's say, like a little section of lava rock and then doing sheet moss on top of it, uh, it shouldn't be an issue. And like I said, pretty much if you overwater it to a point where the water can't go anywhere, or the water can't push out the humidity, you're going to kill it. I mean, you're going to kill the moss. It's what's going to happen. Always, anytime you have moss, make sure that there is some kind of drainage or something for it to also absorb into. So like we said, with different environments, if you have it on top of soil, you're going to have to water it more often, because the soil is actually going to absorb a lot of that excess water. And if you have it on top of rocks, whether it's lava rock or anything like that, it will adhere to it, but you're going to have, and actually, come to think about it, with lava rock, you actually might have to water it more often. And that's just because that lava rock is going to be prone to absorbing the water from that rock, especially if you have a heat source on top or a light. Um, it's going to dry out that moss, so you might actually have to water it even more. Um, but so I hope that helped. We are in the final 7 minutes. Man, it's been a long time since I've done an hour-long video. Yeah, it's crazy. And we just started doing on Spotify. We actually just did our first podcast last night. It was only like 4 minutes. It was an introduction, but I was like, well, there's a lot of care videos and a lot of husbandry and a lot of DIY projects and all this that I think people would enjoy hearing and maybe listen to. And just very similar to what you do with YouTube. If you have a question on something or how to do something, guess what? We go out and we do research, because that's how we become more knowledgeable. So if you have a chance and you like it, make sure to swing over and check us out on Spotify. It's under Blue Dog Aquatics, same as everything else I have. If you haven't subscribed to my channel here on YouTube, make sure to do that for us. And our channel is growing more and more each and every day. It seemed like only yesterday that we were at like 60 subscribers, and now we're at over 4,000, and that's all thanks to you guys. So much fun. Do lives when you can. This is a lot of good replay value. Absolutely. Like I said, this was my first ever live stream. You know, Carrie, the science gal, I've actually done a live stream with her, and if you haven't checked out her channel, make sure to do it. She's an amazing gal, and she has an amazing setup. They do live streams every Sunday, so make sure to go check her out. But yeah, this was my first ever live stream, and so like when it was first loading up, I was like, I don't know how this works. Am I able to add pictures? You know, I'm so used to pre-recording everything and then going through and editing it and putting pictures in and putting my comments in. But with this, you know, for me, this is actually better because I'm a very blunt person, and I think that being able to speak or raw speaking, so no filter, no, oh, that didn't sound right, take two, take four. Oh my God, first when I was doing the podcast, I did the introduction, and I swear I think I did it like 20 times because I was like, I'd like stumble up on a word because for me, I don't have a whole lot of stuff written down. Like, yes, if it's something that is very specific and very needs to have exact points, I might write down notes. But for me, a lot of what I talk about actually comes from up here. And so sometimes when I'm talking, I'll actually stumble across words because I'm like trying to think while I'm talking and can't multitask there. But yeah, it's definitely been fun, and I really enjoyed this. I want to thank everybody that came in, and we're coming up on that hour mark. I think we got like 3 minutes to go. But I wanted to thank everybody that came on and that commented and asked questions. And to see, that is honestly what it does for me. I'll keep following. Glad I found this channel. Absolutely, Carlos. Thank you. I'm glad you were able to find our channel. I love teaching. It's something that I've done for many, many years. And for me, you know what the best feeling for me is when a kid comes up to me and asks me a question, and it's a question that I don't know the answer, because for me it's more of a mystery of, okay, well, that's something I got to look into. And so I'll actually go home, and I kid you not, I will spend days researching and finding out the answer, kind of like solving a puzzle. And then that way, the next time I see that little kid, I'm able to give them the proper, correct answer. And that way, it can help either the care of their fish, the care of their shrimp, the care of their reptiles, the care of their snakes, whatever it has to do with. I like providing help so that way, and you know, we're all in this together. It's not just me spouting random crap. It's all of us coming together and sharing our years of knowledge to help beginners and help people coming into this hobby. And that way they know, okay, this is what I need to do to be successful, or this is the way I can do it so that it turns out this exact look, or what have you. So I'm very glad to be able to share knowledge and, you know, just come on here and talk, because that's honestly what I do. People say it, they're like, oh my God, you can talk forever. Yes, I can. I can talk forever when it's something I'm passionate about. If it's something I'm not passionate about, you might get like a couple of sentences, and I'm like, okay, let's change the subject. And normally it's changing the subject to reptiles or fish or shrimp or aquariums or what have you. So yeah, I want to thank everybody for tuning on, and it's definitely been a lot of fun. And maybe here in a couple of weeks, I know next week we have something else planned for a video. So make sure to stay tuned for that. We're doing videos every Monday, and follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Facebook, we blow up things, and we uh, share new arrivals or new stories each and every, pretty much each and every day. I post on Facebook like daily. It's crazy, but Facebook is also very finicky because they don't like us talking about animals or reptiles or whatever. But yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, the big question for me, your tank or mine? Thanks for tuning in, guys.